is Ignacio. We, along with our daughter Elena and our pup Bay, are the new salt selling crew. We are DIYers with a growing appetite for big adventure. Our goal is to DIY and trade our way up to a blue water worthy boat and set sail on an adventure by sea. We are new to selling and plan to develop our selling skills along the way. Subscribe to stay up to date with our progress and adventures.
Alright, this week we're going to build a new mast support. So this is the two pieces to the original mast support. This piece actually hugged the keel trunk, which would sit in here, and you'd just push this down and it'd kind of hold it in place. And then you would wedge this piece in here and then up against the cabin top. And then there's a little stud you put a nut in to hold this here in place. So what this is for is to actually support the weight of the mast on the cabin top and also give it a little bit of a structural rigidity to tie the actual mast all the way down to the keel. However, this isn't a very good design because the thing can move, vibrate, and really gets rough enough it could potentially come out if there's enough uplift force on the mast. So what I want to do is replace it with one solid piece that actually bolts down to the keel trunk and bolts to the mast foot, and all the blocks will actually bolt through the top plate. The problem is I don't have a solid piece of aluminum big enough for all this. I had some before I got the boat, but I've used it for other projects since. So now I'm stuck with just using a bunch of scrap pieces, welding them together on a flat surface to create a plate, and then cutting it out. So it's all going to work out fine. It's not like a super load bearing part where I'd be worried about ripples on the plate because the not perfectly flat or what have you. But anyway, I'm going to weld some plate together to cut out the top plate, which is going to be the biggest piece so that all the blocks can bolt through it. And then the bottom plate will have a smaller piece, will be a smaller plate that's going to be big enough for the keel trunk to go through, which is roughly this dimension. And then it's going to be that plus a flat of this fiberglass angle that I have. So a while back for a project, I bought some sticks of fiberglass angle, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to bond two pieces of that to the keel trunk to give me a nice wide flat surface that I can bolt this new mast support to. That way it's actually fully tied together and not just kind of pinched in there like this system was. So anyway, we're going to go ahead and get started. We're going to cut the plate into pieces that I can weld together, and then cut that out. And then I have some aluminum angle that I'm actually going to weld two pieces of it together to create a square profile or rectangular profile for the actual structural member of this assembly. So anyway, we're going to get up on time lapse and get moving on this. I'm going to attach the fabricated angle pieces to the keel trunk for the bottom of the mast support. So just need to measure this, figure out how long the two pieces need to be. I'll cut them with a chop saw and we'll get to glassing. So when I designed this, I took the entire width of the thing is the keel trunk plus two flats of this fabricated angle. So should be, you know, perfect as far as width-wise without having to modify this. And also, rather than bust out the chop saw for 2 small cuts, I just decided I'm going to use the hand saw. Alright, so I've got my 2 pieces cut, and I've done some grinding on either side that's actually going to connect to the keel trunk. So I'm going to go install the mast support in the cabin, and then using a clamp I'll fit these up, give me some lines so I know where to put the epoxy, and then we'll epoxy them down, clamp them up, and just leave them overnight. And then tomorrow we'll come in and do some glass work across the faces of these where they're attached to the keel trunk, just to give them a little bit more support. Again, this really isn't load bearing, it's just to keep vibration and movement down, because not only will there be bolts, 4 bolts here, 2 on each side onto these, but all the blocks and the mast foot will all be bolted through this upper plate as well. So this thing is going to be pretty well in place, but we just need to make sure that any vibration is mitigated. Alright, so the mast support brackets are installed on the keel trunk, so we'll just give these overnight to set up, and then tomorrow we can come in. We'll remove the support back out, and glass over all these to just make sure everything's tied in properly. And I'm going to glass in these corners, probably some of that 1-inch stripping, just to make sure everything's bonded and held in properly. Next we're going to move on to installing the mast support. So I'm going to stand it up here, make sure it's where I want it, and then drill my 4 holes and bolt it down on the bottom and bolt it down on top. Solo here tonight, so in order to get all these bolts torqued down, I'm going to start them here and then put vice grips on each nut, so I can't reach where these are at through the companionway while holding the nut back. So the easiest solution is to put vice grips on, and then when I start torquing the bolt, it will just rest up against the mast support and tighten up. Mast support's in, all the blocks are bolted down, everything turned out pretty good. Now that all this is done, I'm going to fabricate a little box to support the front end of the keel. I'm going to drop the keel, check everything there. Alright, so here we are under the port side of the boat. See, the swing keel, it is fully intact. It does have some corrosion on it. I tapped all of it with a hammer and it seems pretty solid, but there is obviously some work that needs to be done to it. To remove this, we would have to lift the boat up about 6 inches on the trailer and put spacers on the bunks, and then shock the keel up, pull the pin out, and release the winch and lower the keel back down. So this thing supposedly weighs 600 to 700 pounds, so you need to be careful with this. Just need to brainstorm how I'm going to do this and go from there. Alright, so here we are under the boat, and you support this keel. So what I plan to do, use a floor jack, raise this up, and then put a block on either side, mark it with a pencil to take it over, put some screws in it, and use that to support the keel. Alright, so I've lifted it up just enough where I started to see movement on the keel. I think that should be enough to allow me to pull the pin out on the inside, or bolt. I guess it's a bolt that acts as a pin. So go inside, we'll take that loose. I've already loosened it like y'all saw yesterday because some of the epoxy resin got on the thread, so I pulled the nut off, so all I got to do is tap it out now. So we'll go in and do that, and then we'll come back down here and see if it'll lower it all. Alright, here we are inside. I'm going to set y'all down over here so you can see me tapping the pin out, and we'll see if anything drops or not. It should be supported. We'll find out. Alright, bolt is out. You can see here where it's been riding on the keel. The part I'm concerned with is that there's really no sealant around the shoulder of the bolt, so I'm not sure how this actually stayed completely dry. It's obviously below the water line, so we will drop the keel and look at it, but I'm going to have to do some research on how we should seal this. So I'm going to not get under the keel because it is loose from inside the boat. We're going to see how far we can lower it without it contacting the back of the keel housing. We may have to get the cherry picker on the back of the boat just to lift it up enough so we have some clearance so we can see the holes and see what happens. Actually, I'm going to make a mark on the keel, so I did drop it a little bit, so hopefully it'll still be close enough so that I can see where it needs to be to get the bolt in and out. Alright. Looks like that's all we're going to get. So I'm going to bring up the cherry picker with some straps, and we're going to pick the back of the boat up a little bit to see if that'll give us enough clearance. Alright, so we have the back of the boat picked up about 8-10 inches, and you can see the entire keel is exposed now, so I should be able to drop the front and see what I need to see. But before I do that, I'm going to put some blocks, just some 6x6s on either bunk board, 2 or 3 places to just support the boat in case this cherry picker decides it doesn't want to hold on anymore. Alright, so I don't really want to lift the boat up anymore or drop the keel anymore because this little thing I made is not necessarily supporting it very well. You can see we're kind of listing to one side. So this basically gives me what I need to see. I just wanted to see that this hole was intact and that the corrosion around it wasn't like about to come apart. So it looks like it's solid enough for a sail or two, and then we'll get this keel down and clean it up before we do any serious sailing, but just to get the boat tested out and make sure there's nothing else that needs to be fixed. Yeah, so anyway, it kind of shows me what I wanted to see, and we'll get this jacked up and see if I can't put the pin in. Alright, so this is when it's kind of cool to have some cheapo little toys. I can't seem to find the bolt hole, but I can set this in there and see. I would use my GoPro, but that's what I'm filming you guys on. So I'm going to set this up in the boat so I can see, and then I'll play with the jack while I'm looking at my phone out here and see if I can get this thing lined up so I can put the bolt back in. Here we go. So it appears that the hole and the pin have misaligned slightly, like the keel has slid forward slightly. I'm sure this makes sense since I picked the back of the boat up. The thing might have shifted if the winch cable was still too taut. It might have picked it up and drug it back a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a ratchet strap. I can see the hole, we're about an inch off, so I'm going to get the ratchet strap, wrap it around the front of the keel back to the axle of the trailer, and see if I can ratchet it back just a little bit. I think I've got them level now, so if I ratchet it back, I can look on my phone through that camera and maybe I'll see the hole show up.
Well, this concludes the projects for this week. Join me next week and I'll show you how to build a composite transom stiffener using the transom as the actual template. It'll stiffen the transom and keep it from deflecting when the rudder is turned hard. Also next week, we'll repair the 4.5 horsepower Evinrude Outboard in preparation for our first sail. If you enjoy our videos, please like, subscribe, and share them with your friends.